Hello and welcome to Just Draw, Just Paint part 16. This week we are going to look at something a little bit different, a little bit faster, which is I want to take a organic lizard, right, as a design concept, and I want to turn it into a vehicle, which is the complete opposite of a lizard, right? And so this is quite a hard thing to do because they don't necessarily always share the same shape language. So we are going to lean into the lizard shape language and we're going to use that as a base to draw everything on top. So here we have my reference you can see before you. It's pretty simple. It's really just 9 images of different types of lizards. I have been very strict with myself and not selected anything like a snake because I really wanted to be honest, right? I wanted to take something that is just purely a lizard and the kind of ideas we see with lizards, like the receding head lines, the limbs, the general long shape of the body, potentially something like the legs, and see if we can translate that into some thumbnails, right, as we typically do, and see if we can take those thumbnails into something like a vehicle, right? Let's see how we do. So let's go. So first things first, we're going to start like we usually do, which is just drawing a bunch of piggies, right? In this case, they look a little bit like vehicle slash lizard, right? We're looking for that shape language. We're trying to see, can we smuggle in legs, the length of the body? Can we attach wheels to legs? We're trying a whole bunch of different things here. We're selecting out the ones we like, right, in order to preserve time. And we're going to draw some vehicle forms and mechanical forms on top of them, right? And so what this allows me to do early on is envision what the vehicle might look like as long as I stretch it out, right? So here we have a sideways view. It's a sideways orthographic view. And that allows me to think about the masses, right? And none of these might have all the design solutions I'm looking for. As you guys know, I like to explore within my thumbnails, and then I like to kit bash my thumbnails to look for new design solutions. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to take all of these, right? We're going to just start combining them, primarily the second and third one, and we're going to see if we can come up with a design that we can then flesh out in 3 dimensions and start to work over into a final product. So this is wildly experimentational. Not many projects will ask you to do stuff like this. Pretty wild stuff here. And so you can see I'm just kit bashing just pieces from each one of them. And I'm trying to look for something that's quite lizard-like. Like you can start to see like almost a salamander or like a newt, right? And here I just dropped that grid over the design and I put it into perspective, and I'm just fleshing out the thickness of this vehicle at this stage. So I'm just taking what I see and I'm expanding it sideways, right? I'm trying to imagine how thick are each of these elements? What elements are overlapping other elements? And I'm looking for basic things like the overlap of tires, of fenders, of the front part, the fins of the head. And now I'm starting to work into the design, right? So pretty typical of all my design work is I like to just draw over a base. And that allows me to just eliminate the stress of the drawing itself, right? And I can even experiment like I am here. Like I really like these forms. Let me see what I can do with them. So I'm looking at the lizards on a different screen in terms of reference, right? And I'm just looking at how they're formed and what parts make them up, right? So for example, I really like the ridges on some of the lizards' heads. And for me, that's just something I felt like I really want to get in on the, let's call it the head part of this vehicle, right? The cockpit, the place where the driver will be, moving this thing around. Now, I don't want to go too far. You'll notice that I didn't make the world's longest tail. And I felt the main reason for that is because when you start to do this kind of stuff, you do start to lean into the cheese territory, right? Of something just looking very toyish. And by the way, this could be a really excellent way to do toy design, right? So if you do have a brief like a lizard vehicle, this would be the way you go about it, right? So it's not like you're going to use this on video games all the time. It's not like you're going to use it in movies all the time. You might use it in animated movies and you might use it for toy design. I think something like that could work quite well. But you never know, right? There are some indie projects out there that are pretty wild, right? Like very, very pushed, very kind of exaggerated, maybe a little bit fun and quirky. Let's not forget Ninja Turtles, right? Which had like the turtle van and the turtle blimp and all that cool stuff. So it's plausible, right? That we could do something like this. Now, in retrospect, right? We can definitely say that you got to be careful though, right? Like what makes a lizard look like a lizard and not, say, for example, like a rat, right? And so it's very hard to distinguish, but I feel like the head design, the cockpit design here really helps us with that, right? It allows us to kind of separate. So here I'm just moving it into real perspective. So I've dropped a 2-point perspective and I'm just aligning everything with that 2-point perspective now that we have all our basic elements in. and I'll do the final tight drawing on top of this. So I'm just going to work out more or less where I want my tires to be and what they're going to kind of do. The positioning of the tires in perspective, very important, making sure that they all line up nicely, even though some are pushed out a bit more, or perhaps they're a little bit thicker. All of those layers have to kind of line up when this thing drives, for me, right, at least to sort of synchronize all of that. And the interesting thing about this kind of design work is that we're only designing what we see in the perspective, meaning that all other elements like internal elements, parts under the car, stuff we can't see is not worth designing. So we're actually designing superficially here, right? Which is a really fun way to design because you don't have to think about rotating this thing all the time, right? But you certainly could. You could then take a drawing like this and show a more detailed side view or a back view for someone to build out and flesh out. So I think the head is starting to come together now with the drawing, right? The whole fender section there I've kind of explored a little bit further. There's no one specific design language for the mech or the vehicle that I'm doing here. So I'm just borrowing elements from various references that I like, and I'm looking at them and saying, like, what is it about that I like? There is some commonality here. For example, I really like the beveled edges feel, so I'm applying that to as many elements on the vehicle as possible. I'm also looking for opportunities to overlap form with other form consistently and constantly, because that is what's going to create that layered effect that we can see on the thumbnail. And I really like that layered shell effect, right? It looks like it could contort, move. There's even like a side door there, which I put a handle on that has an arrow that indicates you could lift it and enter this thing, right? So I'm always thinking, like, how does it operate, right? I'm not just drawing it because, it looks cool. I'm trying to think, like, if someone had to climb into this thing, where would they climb in? How would they look out, right? So initially, I started even with the windshield as something made out of slats and slits. But I later changed that, right? I prefer to have a glass face so that someone who's in there is driving can look out. So right now it's all about just adding those details, right? So I kind of finished it up quite quick there. And now I'm working into the tire design, and that's about it, right? That really is just the entire process here. I hope you guys have enjoyed following along. It's quite a quirky one this week. I do apologize, but here's the final result. And this is something fun you can certainly try out. Can you turn an organic form into a mechanical form?